Guten Abend, hello, welcome, buenas tardes, aquí en el Goethe Institut. Hoy vamos a hablar sul tema o sulla cuestión, sulla domanda, ¿cómo ha reaccionado Europa ante el coronavirus? Y es una demanda que es muy importante para nosotros, para todos nosotros. Tenemos tres invitados esta tarde para discutir sobre este tema. Quiero presentarlo cortamente. Es Ulrike Guérot, es la directora del European Democracy Lab. Tenemos Jochen Müller, que es el director adjunto de la representación de la Comisión Europea de Madrid. Y como moderadora somos muy felices que nos ayuda Carme Colomina, que es jornalista. Muchas gracias y estoy muy curiosa del debate. Gracias.
How is the EU coping with the corona crisis? This is a part of a whole session that is organized to discuss on behalf of the German presidency of the Council of the European Union, all these European challenges that we have ahead. So welcome to all of you. We are going to talk about the European Union and the COVID-19 and how this is changing our daily life, but also our social, political, economical perceptions and perspectives. And we will have two special guests for that. I see that we are already getting some people, some public. You are very welcome. And you are very welcome also to send all your questions to this debate, because this will be a conversation. So feel free to use the chat, and you can use it already since the beginning of the conversation to send your questions, and you can send them in German, English, Catalan, Spanish, and we will do our best to answer all of them. So let's go to the point. Let's go to see how are we doing? How are we coping with the corona crisis? How is Europe adapting to this big challenge, this unforeseen challenge 1 year ago, and how are we reacting? And well, this is already, we can say, a very long crisis, because we were in the middle of the second wave. We have been also witnessing very difficult or very different political chapters since the very chaotic, let's say, first reaction in March, April at EU level, all the efforts for coordination, all the political discussions, the debate on conditionality, but also the economical effort on the table. So we have been already seeing a very big struggle, a stress test for the EU as a project, and a stress test for countries, for regions, but also for world views, in fact, because this is a clash of world views, also what we're going through. So let's talk about what has been done, but mainly what is our horizon. I think it would be very interesting to see where are we heading and how are we going to be there in the next future after this crisis. So we have with us today two people who know a lot about it. And I will be first saying hello to Jochen Müller. He's the Deputy Director of the Representation of the European Commission in Madrid. So thank you very much for joining us from Madrid.
Good evening. Bona nit.
Bona nit. You will say it in German for me too, I guess. And we have also in Vienna, if I'm not wrong, we have Ulrike Guérot, and she is the director of the European Democracy Lab. She's a political scientist, and she has a new book, in fact, explaining already how is her idea of this European Union after the corona crisis. I think it's called Nothing Will Stay as It Was. So this gives us a hint already on how is she, or what is she going to share with us today. So I'm not going to talk anymore. Now the floor is yours. So let's start with Jochen Müller, because he knows a lot of what has been done, but I think that he knows about the tools, the strategies we have also to build this horizon. How have we changed with the crisis, and where are we heading? Jochen, all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carme. Bona nit, buenas noches, guten Abend an alle. Freut mich hier zu sein. Muchas gracias. I'm very happy to be here. And I think for an introductory statement, just to maybe remind us of what, from my point of view, has happened over the past six months. Also knowing that this is obviously one of the deepest crises we have ever gone through. Not only a lot of being talked now about the economy, of course, but I think the personal drama which are inherent in this crisis is really dramatic. So many deaths, so many sick people. Me, myself, and my 5 family members, we were all sick in March and April very heavily. Although I'm trying to be a fit person, but I was very long in bed, even with anxieties and difficulties to breathe. My father-in-law here in Spain, he was even in intensive care. So it's really something which I need to underline, that this is obviously the number one message. This drama is unprecedented. And I think we have to do everything to improve the situation, to find a vaccine finally as quickly as possible. Now, from my point of view, what happened at the beginning, you said it was chaotic in the beginning. I think what one can say is that member states, the countries, have reacted like all of us. What have we done when we were hearing about the crisis or the lockdown? Well, we quickly went to the supermarket and bought toilet paper, right? And locked back home, not wanting to talk to anybody, and not going out. I think member states have done the same. They shut their frontiers. They stopped even exporting some goods to other countries. And we were really at risk at the point of losing, I think, the most valued thing we have in the European Union, which is the internal market and the free movement of people, capital, goods, and services. Now, I think after a certain time of shock, the European Commission, I think, woke up pretty quickly, I would say, and reacted in an unprecedented response, both for countries, companies, and people. We first of all looked at the frontiers and at mobility. Okay, how can we open up borders again? Of course, for goods and for the trucks which were stuck at the borders, we opened up very quickly these green lanes so that no truck would last more than 15 minutes to cross a border and to bring the goods, the food, the drink, and also the medical devices across Europe. And we also looked at persons and families. How can they continue visiting each other cross-border, or the cross-border workers? And all of that was done in 2 to 3 weeks, I would say, and it was working after that until today. We also did very, very quickly, I think, because this is administrative and also legal decisions. One has not to underestimate that. In a couple of weeks, we reoriented unspent cohesion funds. And actually, we scratched everywhere the money. It was 8 billion in total, which triggered 20 billion in investment, that we said to member states, you can use those for purposes, even if they were not foreseen for that purpose. You can reorientate this money, and you don't need to co-fund it. Normally, cohesion funds need to be co-funded at least 20-30%. We said 100% will come from the European Union, because we wanted to have money available quickly to help member states. And thirdly, I think also on the health front, we did a lot of work to convince member states to look to their neighbors and to help them. We saw after 4 to 6 weeks patients being brought across the border to be treated in Germany or in Austria or in other member states. We saw that we had ventilators being brought across the borders. Our commissioner for the internal market, Mr. Breton, he very quickly realized that we need to act and see how many companies actually in Europe produce masks. And I don't know whether some of you have asked this question, but it was 10 in all over Europe at the beginning of the crisis. And quickly they managed that 500 companies then finally produced very quickly these masks. And finally, we also cooperated and did our civil protection mechanism from the European Union to repatriate all those Europeans stranded abroad outside Europe, several hundreds of thousands of people, which we brought back together with member states with financing of the European of the European Union. This is the immediate reaction, but I spent a little bit more time on the immediate reaction because I think it's unfair to say that there was really chaos for a long time. Huh?
No, not for a long time. I said the first weeks, and it was certainly, from my point of view, there was certainly a difference between the efforts for coordinations that we had at the EU level with the EU institutions and the way they reacted, which was very different from my point of view from previous crises, let's say, and then comes the member states, which probably will go for the next round of questions.
Exactly. No, that was the short term. We can speak about the medium term, which is all this money coming from the BCE,
and
the recovery fund and so on.
We have already some questions, so I will also use them for our next round. But I would like to hear first Ulrike Guérot also, to know your view, your impression of all these changes that we are going through.
Well, first, thank you for everybody for having me here, to the Goethe Institute, to Carme moderating this, to Jochen Müller from the Commission. I'm very pleased that we don't stop talking about Europe in these crisis days. And I'm very happy that we found these means in being in Zoom talks and connecting. I'm sad to not be on the Ramblas in Barcelona, because that would have been more beautiful, but so. Where we are, and I have three sentences or thoughts to give you. The first is, I'm thankful for Jochen Müller to explain, the first times and then what the European Commission did. I think we have all understood that moment of panic, and then that the European Union tried to sort it out. What did the EU try to sort out, and what is really the new thing, if there is one new thing? I think it is new that, as everybody knows, in this European summit of July, there is this European lending capacity. And it has increased the fiscal transfer of the European Union with this rescue package, 750 billion, out of which 360 are direct aids for the countries most affected, like Spain, Italy, and so on and so forth, and the other 390 billion, which are lending. The idea, and this is very important to strengthen, especially as I'm talking as a German, and the discussion in Germany is obviously sort of tough. Are we again spending too much money for the South, all this transfer union talk? And we have seen the frugal force and all this, Austria, Netherlands arguing against it. But I think it's wrong to argue that this is a transfer union, and it's wrong to argue that it's a debt community or debt mutualization. What it essentially is an interest rates nivellation, because Italy, as of today, is lending for 2.5% at financial markets, and Germany is lending for 0.5%. So if we are in the pandemic and every country needs to have massive lending to have a lot of money to go over the consequences of the crisis, it makes really a difference whether you are lending at 2.5 or at 0.5. And the very fact that the Commission now, as a juridical person, for the first time is lending the money and then distributing the money to the EU countries is a novum. So that has been the Merkel-Macron sort of plan, which then became the European Rescue Package plan. I'm very thankful to Angela Merkel, who now is not only the president of the chancellor of the Federal Republic, but also president of the European Union, that she managed this really tricky deal, because we had 4 days. Remember that it was critical in July to have it. I want to go one sentence deeper in this argument, because it's important to me to think about, if we are thinking, say, pandemic, how Europe is affected and how we get on. If we reason in the history of the European integration and what has made the European integration strong over time, since, say, 1950 and coal and steel agreement and single market and the euro, it was always that we found ways in crises to go for structural changes so that we are not having the same disputes the next crisis. So for me, it was very important that we see in this crisis some structural change that the European Union is taking as a lesson learned out of history, out of memory, and in this pandemic. And the lesson learned was this interest rates sort of mutualization through common lending. It is not much. I heard a couple of economists saying that increasing the fiscal capacity of the European Union for 0.6 percentage points is not enormous. Yeah, so we can dispute, and I hope we can dispute this or discuss this in this forum, whether it's this Hamiltonian moment already, or it gives way to increase the fiscal capacity, or whether that is not the case. But at least we have a foot in the door, and that is the novum. The second little argument I want to do, and also to give this to Jochen Müller. What I see as an analyst who is outside of the European Commission is there are two European discourses. The one is what the European Commission is doing, is what von der Leyen is now going to do, the conference on the future of the European Union, citizens consultation and all these things. The other thing, and that's the sort of top-down thing. And to be honest, it's not that much working. I have been amazed by the speech of von der Leyen, the State of the Union speech. I found this a very courageous, very forward-reaching next generation Europe speech. But I must say that the commenting in the press was not overwhelming. And also this conference on the future of the European Union, you know, as I know, that 62% of the Brussels bubble people think that there will be no outcome. Yeah, so there is inertia in the European system. And we know that if there is inertia in the European system, it means that member states are not willing to perform. It's not the Commission to blame, obviously, not the Parliament neither, but the member states. But, and that is my point, and I hope to discuss this, and I will end with this sort of statement. There is a different European discourse and a different discussion. And that is indeed the whole civil society bubble. There's just an hour ago, the Nice Declaration on civic education, which has been published in the internet about the need of civic education now. But there is, to give you that one, if you go the hashtag CTOE, Citizens Take Over Europe, there is an alliance of 56 action NGOs who are basically in the internet every Wednesday from 10 to 12 already writing European constitution. So even before Mrs. von der Leyen has officially launched her conference on the future of the European Union, there's a lot of civic activity. And so what I see is that, you know, you don't speak German, but in German there is Hölderlin, who has this sentence, wo Gefahr in Verzug ist die Rettung nah, where the danger is, the salvation will come. And so for me, this pandemic is a danger for Europe. There is a real danger in all layers that we have troubles in the system, strengths on our political systems, the populism, the national, all these things. But there is the salvation also. Perhaps it's not yet the mainstream sort of discussion, but there is a civil society which I think is more active than ever before. And the notion of European citizenship is sort of emerging from bottom up. And so I see a duality of these things.
We had already time to make these initial statements, and I'm sure Jochen has a lot already to answer to Ulrike, and we are already getting some questions too, so it will be good to introduce them in the discussion. So my idea to sum up is that in a way Europe has learned from the previous crisis. As you mentioned, there was certainly a change of narrative and a capacity of reaction from EU institutions. From the State of the Union speech, I think it was clear to see that there is a narrative from the European Commission, from von der Leyen, that the Europe that protects, which is also a way to build the legitimacy of the EU project. And one of the questions that we had is the EU a recipe for success, or at least is a recipe to be useful, to be effective, to protect the EU citizens? So Jochen.
Yes, well, looking at those questions, I mean, and also thank you for your words, Ulrike. Completely agree, just to comment on those, that this is a moment of change, indebting the EU in the name of all. And I would say that the money, well, macroeconomically, maybe not so much, but it's almost, not completely, but almost doubling our budget, knowing that these 750 billion will be spent front-loaded, right? They will be spent mostly in the first 3 years. So I think, yes, it's a lot of money, and let's see whether member states are able to absorb all that money. Huh? I think that's actually the real challenge we have here. Once we have all the legislative proposals and necessary groundwork done, member states need to implement. And let's see whether they are able to do that. In Spain, for example, there are certainly some bottlenecks which we need to try to overcome, but in other countries as well. Yeah. As to the question whether the EU has proven itself, I would say so, yes. Are member states on board with everything the Commission is pushing for? Well, probably no, but I think the world has also changed over the past 10 years, I would say. If you manage to get, and that's the point of Ulrike, civil society support, not member state support, but citizen support in the member states, and then you can do quite a lot, and you can push member states to do more. And the health competence of the European Union is a good example. Gemma Esteve was asking whether there is an opportunity, right? For common health government. Yeah. Mrs. von der Leyen, our president, floated this idea in her State of the Union speech. We have just published 2 days ago our most recent Eurobarometer, on which we do yearly, every year, and the response is quite clear. Citizens want to have that competence for member states. And we will see a very, very interesting debate, in my opinion, if we get the conference on the future of Europe right, that citizens will push member states to go further than actually member states want to go. I think this is true for the health competence for the European Union. It might also be true in what to do at European level to coordinate, to prevent similar crises from happening in the future, not only in the health area, but maybe in other areas, maybe even in foreign affairs. Maybe they see the time that we move to more qualified majority voting. So I think there's actually appetite for clear cross-border issues, pandemic health, energy, defense, foreign affairs. Trade, of course, is already a competence, but even those secondary trade issues, state aid, and so on, member states will be pushed by their own citizens to do more. I think that will come out of the conference. It's probably my wishful thinking, but I also, taking the temperature, that is what I think could happen in some areas, because citizens have a very clear idea of what has not worked in this crisis. And I think the initial reaction was really problems between member states and problems of coordination.
Yeah, and as it happened in previous crises, people look at Brussels expecting an EU answer. But once again, the EU had no competencies on health. So yeah, that's also sometimes the problem, that there are big expectations for the EU project, and the EU project has not always all the tools needed to give an answer. And but in this case, I had the feeling that the coronavirus crisis was different from the previous crisis, because this time there was really shared vulnerability. I think all these divides that we could see, east, west, north, south, in other crises, even if the heat of the pandemic was not exactly the same in every member state, the shared feeling of vulnerability, that was something that we all felt, because we all felt that the crisis was there, or that the pandemic was threatening everyone. So that's the first thing. The second thing, on the other hand, is that even if this share vulnerability was there, this is a very asymmetric Europe. You were talking, Jochen, very well about these problems of the capacity to absorb, and at the same time we also saw that there were different capacities of health systems to cope with the pandemic when it started in February, March, April, and June, the first months. And once again, asymmetries are one of the biggest dangers that the EU can face in the next months or in the post-crisis. How can the EU assure that the European Union won't be more unequal after the crisis? Probably this is one of the big challenges too. Ulrike.
Therefore, it's so important to underline that this recovery money does not go proportionally to all member states, right?
Yeah.
Those who were hit harder will receive more money. Just today, for the ERTES, for the sure money that we have assigned, Spain will receive a quarter of all the money. Spain will receive 21 billion euros, and today they just received the first 6 billion to pay for their working schemes. I think it's important to underline that this is not proportionally being given out and handed out to all member states according to their economic weight. No, it's according to how hard they have been hit during the crisis.
Ulrike.
Yes, thanks for the question in the chat room here and for what Jochen Müller explained. Just to pick up on this and to make, I do not want to create a confrontation line, that's not the issue, but you know, if you look outside of the European Commission on what the European Commission is doing and on the talk about it and on the discourse, citizens and what they think, as much as the European money is what is stabilizing us, the ECB, the umbrella, 1.8 billion, without Europe, there is just nothing happening. That's a given. In the discourse, this is not present. I just spent 4 days in Berlin. I spent it with deputies, German deputies, and I can tell you that there is no even awareness that what they are all discussing now in terms of pandemic and crisis rescue, whatever, that everything they do in the Bundestag ultimately is depending on ECB and the European Commission. So what I want to say with this, everybody likes money. And I see the concern that Jochen Müller has in making this money absorbed and getting it into the countries and so. But money is not what will help us. Money alone will not do it. This is my point. I think this is my point. I'm more with, say, Mr. Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, yeah, to quote him, but everything is about purpose. And what I'm missing a little bit, and I mean, Mrs. von der Leyen, her State of the Union speech was really, for me, extraordinary. But I felt disappointed that it was not really picked up by much of the press, even not the German press, like here's a speech, next generation Europe, where will that lead to? And again, what I want to say is that we have all the ambition of Mrs. von der Leyen, and we have a lot of money. I'm not so sure whether in terms of what is the purpose, what is the systemic change that we need to achieve through the pandemic? What is the vision that we are painting at the horizon? Sort of that is where we want to be in 24 when Mrs. von der Leyen is getting re-elected. I'm not so sure whether there's a plan. And I am a little bit fearful that this plan is there in a given part of civil society. As I said, there is a vivid social society sort of scenery out there, but it's not dominant. And my point is that the moment you have weakening governance in France, weakening governance, you know, look at the CDU Parteitag and who will follow Mrs. Merkel. And, you know, if you look at the fragmentation of national governments, my argument would be that the fragmentation of national arguments is also fragmenting the European argument on the level of governments. And so I want to point to for me, it's a huge dualism in the system that the citizens, and you said it, Mr. Müller, the citizens tend to want more from Europe than actually the EU governance system, which is path dependent from the member states, can deliver. I give you one example. We had from Oxford University a polling, and the barometer does not show such pollings because the Eurobarometer is reasoning in aggregated, sort of the Austrians, the Spanish, you know, you're not doing non-aggregated polling, which is a pity. But we had University of Oxford polling in April that 72% of European citizens would like to have a European basic income, which is a figure. And you also have 2/3 of European citizens who would like to see a European unemployment scheme. The problem is that we have a huge crisis of representation in the European Union. So if the questions now in the chat is, Are we getting a European health system? Are we getting a European unemployment scheme? Are the citizens getting equal treatment? That is, you know, Mrs. von der Leyen's goal. Are they getting equal treatment throughout the pandemic? But we are still left with a system which is distributing money via states and the council and so on and so forth. We are having a huge crisis of representation. And my urge would be that the European Commission would need to be bolder in shaping institutional designs to bring us out of this pandemic. Because with the given institutional setting, which is passed dependently in intergovernmental negotiations, sort of lockdowns, so to say, I'm fearful that we may get a lot of inertia.
But for all these changes, that structural changes that Ulrike is asking, you need member states for that. I mean, we've seen that the European Commission had big strategies, and we must say that Germany this time, not only as a council presidency, has been really side by side with the Commission, but of course the problem is on the member state side.
Yeah. Yes, no, and I agree fully with Ulrike on this. The structural changes are key, but I think before we can get there, we need to first go via a change of discourse. And I think there we have all to do our bit. The Commission is trying that. We are not the best communicators, apparently, but it's also true that we will not succeed without member states, regional and local governments. So I think it's an appeal also that we change discourse and that we get away. And I think the same could be done in the Netherlands and the other frugal countries. We get away from portraying this money or this support as charity. It is not. It isn't the self-interest of Holland that Italy is being helped or Spain is being helped. It isn't their self-interest. Why? Because they want to sell their tulips and their products throughout the European Union. Let's not forget that for all our member states, the internal market is more than 2/3, more than 70% in several cases of their exports and of their market. So it's self-interest in the end. And there's also self-interest, and we shouldn't treat member states and let people think. Member states are also not much different than people. If you help somebody, if you help your neighbor, and you help him out and you give him salt because he has no salt anymore, it will come back. And the same happens at the European Union level, at the member states level. We have seen this. Now it's really the Czech Republic which is in deep trouble. And they are being helped with ventilators, masks, and patients being transferred to other countries. They were having no numbers in March and April, no problems at all. Hungary, let's look at Hungary. They are now also having higher and higher numbers, and they will see that this solidarity, and we should give it, we have to give it, and we should show the Hungarian people, the European Union, with all the bad talk by their prime minister about the European Union, we continue to be there. And this solidarity is, of course, helping the other, but it's in the self-interest, in a club of values, in a club where we want to also have clout to influence in the world.
Okay, can I chime in here, Carmen, just to because it's so linked to what Jochen said.
And you have a question for you too.
Yeah, there is a question.
What structural changes you had in mind? So you can answer both if you want to.
Jochen, I agree. The discourse needs to change and sort of its self-interest and so sort of self-interest for the member state. But if I have one wish free this evening in my prayers, yeah?
Of course.
Stop talking member states. We need to talk European citizens. For me, this pandemic is or is not, in the sense of Mrs. von der Leyen, in the sense of consultations of citizens, the biggest paradigm change to achieve, which is that we shift the system of the EU from union of states to union of citizens. The European Union is both. In the Article 1 to 12 Treaty of Maastricht, you have union of states and union of citizens. So far, I'm a political scientist. In the modus of representation, we are basically only union of states, and most of the things are done by the council in co-decision with the parliament, but we are far away from union of citizens. If now the pandemic tells us that the Hungarians, as much as the Czechs, as much as the Dutch, as much as the Belgians, whoever the Spaniards, need the same ventilators, breathing things, pandemic money, whatever, then the reasoning should be to build the future European Union, which is the next generation Europe that Mrs. von der Leyen wants, on European citizens and on union of citizens. For me, this is really crucial. So if I'm asked to Ulrike Guérot, what structural changes do I have in mind? I have three in mind. One is democratization. The second is full parliamentarization of the European Parliament. And the third is to build a democracy based on the general principle of political equality for all European citizens, which is we need political equality for all European citizens. And we do not have this. We have basically a hybrid law structure in the European Union, which makes that the goods are equal. A cucumber is a cucumber is a cucumber in the single market. That capital is equal. A euro is a euro is a euro. A Greek euro is an Irish euro is a Portuguese euro. But the only ones who are not yet benefiting from legal equality throughout the territory of Europe are the citizens themselves. We do not yet have the same unemployment scheme, the same access to ventilators, the same access to basic income and so on and so forth. And I think this is the strategic and the dominant change we need to strive for.
I will just pick up something that you were mentioning about this idea to talking to the citizens and put them at the core of the decisions taken, because that made me think about the idea of the conditionality of funds to Jochen Müller, because that's a very long debate that it's already at the EU level in member states. With this conditionality of funds, are we punishing, for instance, the Hungarian citizens or the Czech citizens that they would need probably these funds also to improve their situation?
Now, do you talk about the rule of law conditionality or the conditionality in the frame of the European semester?
In fact, I was mentioning the rule of law because that was something already related to the structural funds, for instance, to the cohesion funds, not only for all these pandemic funds.
Well, the rule of law conditionality is now being debated, as you know, for the new MFF, the new budget, 7-year budget of the European Union. We are not there yet. We hope to be able to push those who are reluctant to do so. But I think it's precisely what we need to do if we want to continue being a European Union of values and we want to defend our citizens, even if they are not a majority in a given member state. I think we need to be clear about that. And I think it's now or never that we get this conditionality adopted. The rule of law for us is not negotiable, this conditionality. Obviously, the Hungarians try to water it down, but I think we need, in one way or another, more leverage, which goes beyond Article 7 procedures, so that we can really say, if we have fundamental issues, like with the rule of law, with the independence of the justice, that we can also withhold European funds. Because at the other hand, it's not only looking at the Hungarian citizens who might, yes, and companies need that money, but we need to justify in front of all 430 million other Europeans that our money goes to countries who abide by the rules. And I think this is a very important debate that we cannot push away.
Okay, so I come in and I'm now getting a little bit heated up because if I talk about European citizens, I think I have a slight, I wouldn't say dispute, but a different understanding. Coming back to the idea of shifting paradigms from Union of States to Union of European citizens, and going back to von der Leyen's desire to consult the European citizens, we need to assess the European Commission, the European Parliament, the European institutions need to understand that we are not European citizens. We are, at the end of the day, Carmen is a Spanish citizen, I'm a German citizen, you are probably a German citizen, we have British, Slovak, Portuguese citizens. We do share some of the values, we do share some of the rights, for instance, the right to go to a consulate of a different member state in an African country, I don't know what. But what we do not share, to quote Pierre-Rosa Vallon, and I'm very serious about this, is le sacre du citoyen, the sacred of citizenship. As European citizens, we do not share. So if we are talking in this Goethe discussion with Carmen, with, you know, pandemic and what does it does to us, and if we want the structural change, if I have to be asked what is the fundamental change I want, is I want to be really European citizen, really and really and really, which is, I do not want a distinction between Carmen and me, or whatever Slovak and Portuguese citizen and me, when it comes to voting, when it comes to taxation, and when it comes to social access, which is now the thing we are discussing with unemployment schemes, with SURE and the short worker conditions and so on and so forth. Why am I saying this? For those interested, because I have a question on transnational list and building a different kind of democracy. But for those interested, I am now, how do you say this in English? Ein Nebenklägerin. I'm having a case open at the European Court together with many others. I will put the number of the case into this chat. And the case runs like, we asked the European Court to be, that European citizenship is of permanent status, yes or not? Because Brexit is at the horizon and the Britons will lose European citizenship as of January 2021. What we argue is that if the European Union is union of states and union of citizens, it should be possible in theory, and that is very important, that the UK as a country leaves the European Union under Article 50, but the Brits remain British citizen because remain European citizen because European citizenship is of permanent status and cannot be withdrawn. It has been granted by the European institutions in '92 with the Maastricht Treaty, so it cannot be taken away by the United Kingdom. This case, I think, is really also interesting for the Catalan case, for the Scottish case, because we have already 58% of Scots who want to join the European Union after the UK have been leaving the European Union. And all this tells us that if we want to have a future in a different kind of Europe after this pandemic, which we are facing, and the consequences which we will be facing for long, I think we need to redefine the notion of European citizenship far beyond than what the European Commission is actually doing. And I would wish if we could win the European Union, the European Commission and the European Parliament on this.
Jochen, if you want to react on that.
Yes, no, I think completely agree, but the citizenship that you put at the horizon is what I personally would like to see, but it means a European federal state with legal rights for everybody in the same way. But for this you need, as you know, the legal competence, and this we don't have. So the only way to get there, in my opinion, is to via treaty changes. Right? Because you will not get a minimum wage across the European Union if you don't change the treaties. You will not get the same fiscal treatment of companies and citizens if you don't change the treaties, because all of this is simply not in the competence of the European Union. The citizenship as such, I think, is a right in itself, but to get where you want to go, and where I also would like to get, is that the equal rights that you can go to court in front of it, for all areas of life, we would need to really go into the very, very deep integration of the European Union, and we are not there. As a citizen, you have rights as a European citizen, but only in those aspects where the European Union has acquired that right and where member states have given this to the European Union level, which is, as you know, only part of the rights that we have. You know that we have fought for 7-8 years to have the same divorce rights for transnational couples. And it's not even an exact harmonization of rules. It's simply a harmonization on different rights whenever you have a cross-border case. So it's a lot of work behind, But I think to get where you paint on the horizon, we really need a very serious treaty change.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead. No problem.
Okay, so kind of united. Can I be precise on this? Because we talked about this conditioning of rule of law. I see the point of the European Commission to not give in on the values and so on and so forth. But as a political scientist, I want to be critical of this position because first, those who will be suffering from this will be the Hungarian citizens, but that is even not my point. I know that the European Commission wants to send a signal on rule of law and so, but here is my fundamental point, and it points to the question which is now in the internet, so a kind of United States of Europe. We have been talking about United States of Europe since 70 years and we never made it there, unfortunately. Political science, if you go from whatever, Carl Schmitt to Marcel Gauchet, tells you that ultimately, and this is just my wish, I know that I cannot change sort of reality as of now, but I think that we need to go into an in-depth discussion, which goes beyond this paraphrases, sort of, we need to have rule of laws and we change the values and therefore we need to condition rule of law with Hungarians. I know that this is the mechanics of how we talk now. But I just want to point to the fact that in theory and in political science, you cannot disentangle politics from law. You cannot disentangle the legal framework from the political constitutional framework. It's just not possible in the end. So if this pandemic should alert us on the flaws of the European project, then on these flaws. And it means ultimately that we are ending in something that in Germany you would call Rechtspositivismus, positivism of rights. If you always place a legal entity of Europe against political constituencies in Hungary, in Poland, wherever, but you can, as long as the European Union remains in its institutional setup as it is, with sovereign member states who have a parliament, who do the legal work through parliaments, then they are free to do the legal work and to run their legislation. Yeah. So the other option, instead of then saying, but we have rule of law system, Article 7, we need to punish them, we should think about merging law and politics at the European level. So the politicization of Europe through the notion of European citizenship, I think this is the learning curve. This is the lesson to be learned. This is the takeaway from this pandemic. And it comes with a different angle on the notion of European citizenship, and it comes with a different angle of what it ultimately would mean. So then, and this is the question in the chat, would it mean United States of Europe? Essentially, I'm arguing no, because it would mean, in essence, a European Republic. Because if equality of citizens, legal equality of citizens is what makes a state, then those who agree to be equal in rights, they constitute a republic, which would be the paradigm shift from union of states to union of citizens. That is my crucial point, and I would love to see the pandemic and the conference of von der Leyen seizing the opportunity to bring us a step further to this paradigm change.
Well, that's really a challenge for Jochen Müller, because how do we get from here to there, in fact?
One sentence more. I don't know how we get there. I don't know. But what I know is that thoughts become words, become action, become reality. If we do not think it, we will never get there. One thing I can say is that sometimes you get something in history, even if you do not get it through the way you think you need to get it. So if Jochen Müller talks always about treaty change, I would say, as an historical example, I'm a German citizen. I have been told that Germany should be unified for 40 years, but then unification came, and it did not come because Honecker and Kohl signed a treaty. It came because there was a citizen movement with Bärbel Bohley and many activists who did the Monday things in the streets. And after a certain moment in time, there was a window of opportunity opening for unification, which came, but through different way than we thought it needs to come. And so what I see in Europe is a historical process which is further to this one than in this sort of linear thinking that at some point we get the heads and state of member states to agree on a treaty change and blah, 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 which we do not see. But we do not see the member states doing it. Perhaps we see the citizen.
It would look the hardest way to go through treaty change, because we know how difficult would that be to go through all this way. But at the same time, it shows that there is a gap between the European aspirations and the European actions, probably. Jochen Müller.
Yes, but again, I think with all due respect, what I don't see on European streets is mass demonstrations in favor of making that change. I don't see it in Germany, I don't see it in Spain, I don't see it in Hungary. Sometimes I think we have to get out of the Brussels bubble and think, do really citizens see completely that need of this change? Hopefully there will be someday this push. That's why I'm saying we should listen, and that's why I think the conference on the future of Europe is so important, because I think citizens will want more than what member states are able and willing to give. But until we have those mass demonstrations in favor of more European rights on the streets, I think the only way to make progress is as we did over the past decades, which is step by step. And I think we have done during the pandemic, and I agree, it's a watershed moment. We have done a great change with borrowing money on the markets in the name of all member states, which is in a certain way, certain mutualization of debt. We will also, I think, come after this conference, that's my hope, to the very clear conclusion that citizens really see that cross-border overall issues need to be taken on by the European level. Now, to come to the point where they say we want a common minimum income or minimum wage across Europe, I think we are also talking about that, but it's mostly about new legislation which would need to be introduced. There is a debate on this in the European Parliament. The socialists have suggested that 60% of the average salary in a given member state should be the minimum wage. So there is a debate on that. And I think the process is via adoption of legislation. The other alternative would be transferring that competence to the European level. But again, I think this would require treaty change.
And do you really think that Europe could go, or the EU members could go through a treaty change and a treaty ratification in that precise moment where we're still negotiating the Brexit, post-Brexit agreement, when we know what happened in the last referendums organized in the Netherlands, for instance? Could you really imagine how this would be?
Well, you see, I don't know what's really the alternative other than mass demonstrations, which I cannot see. I think we need to see that at the end of this process of 2 years, we have to evaluate what is really the outcome. Is there evidence? And if you can tell the different European institutions which would need to adopt that 70% of the feedback that we got is that for cross-border health issues, pandemic and the like, stockage of ventilators, of masks, of crucial medicine, of crucial equipment, etc., citizens really, really want to have that at the European level, coordinating all member states, then I think there's a very good argument to do that. But I think this demand needs to come from citizens themselves. And I think therefore, this process of the conference is so important. And I think also the moment is such an opportunity, because the pandemic has shown that healthcare, in part energy, certainly, in part defense, there's several issues on the table which citizens understand can only be well and effectively managed at the European level and not at the member states level.
Chiming in here, and sorry for being a little bit nitty gritty on this, but it's for me, this is still too linear and to say classical discourse, yeah, in the member states, and then they do treaty change and so. With all due respect, I think this ignores the political systems we are living in. Look at Spain, Vox, look at Salvini, Italy, look at what is happening in France and whether Macron will be elected. I mean, go member state by member state country and look at the political economy of the member states. It's basically all in pure fragmentation, and it's the least to say that most of the EU member states are not stable. And they do not have political discourses. Not top down, but you know, there's nobody out talking much about Europe these days. Macron has tried, but who talks about Europe in Spain these days? Who talks about Europe in Italy, in Germany? Nobody, yeah? So what I'm saying, and yeah, so my point is not to be cynical or fatalist. This is not my point. I'm a political scientist. I try to analyze how things are. But for me, it means that state actors are increasingly failing on Europe. It was a lucky thing that we did the summit, that we have this foot in the door for increased fiscal spending, and the Commission is doing a great work. I'm the least to criticize the European institutions or the Commission, let alone the Parliament. I'm just observing a very crucial moment that this pandemic is. And I think if you are asking for the masses in the street, well, they have been there. It was the Pulse of Europe who brought the people in the streets to demonstrate for Europe for the first time since 70 years. It wasn't Mr. Rutte, not Mrs. Merkel, not Macron, but we had the Pulse of Europe for a long while being in the streets. Now we have this citizens take over, the European civil society. There is a lot going on there. Yes, it's bubbles. Obviously, there's a Brussels bubble about all this, you know, civil society being in the process of the conference on the future of the European Union, but there's much more. We have a lot of data, which are not the Eurobarometer data, but if you go different data, non-aggregated data, that's very important to think in non-aggregated data. There's no such thing than an Austrian position to Europe. There's no such thing than a Dutch position to Europe or a Spanish position to Europe. The countries are divided, and so are the citizens of the countries. Who is France? Is France today Macron France, or is it Marine Le Pen France, or is it Gilets jaunes France? If you say, is Germany in favor or not for European unemployment scheme, there's no answer, because probably you have 30% of Germans who would be in favor of a European unemployment scheme and another 30% who aren't. So the dehomogenization of the political system of the EU, which is in the Council, needs to be shifted away. And if the pandemic has one goal, I think it should be that discourse that we all try to stem. Go to the union of citizens, make the citizens equal in front of the law, go for the dehomogenization, and stop talking about the member states as the actors of the European integration process.
Yeah, but at the same time, citizenship is not homogeneous, it's also heterogenic at the end. But
I agree, I agree.
But we are almost at the end of this debate, and I would like to have a final statement from you both. And I would like, if you can also, that you could address whether you see the European Union in 1 year time. So let's imagine and let's hope that in 6 months we can have the vaccination already there. So we will be already going out of the health crisis. And after the health crisis, what will be still on the table? How has the EU changed through all this long process? So whether you see the EU in a year time, and maybe not so much the wishful thinking, but also we can add the wishful thinking. But if we try to establish, to go a little bit out of this uncertainty that we are still in, where would we be?
I hope that in 1 year time we will be talking about institutionalizing the ad hoc measures that we have taken. To give you an example, we have done common procurement, public procurement for masks, for medicine, for personal protection equipment, for respirators. We have done this already. We have launched these and we have established stocks for the European level. And hopefully in 1 year time, we will look back and say, that was a good idea. Why don't we do it also in the future? To prevent crisis from happening, to be better prepared. the same. We have, I think, to be in the one on the global level to push for a vaccine solution and to make it available to everybody. Hopefully in 1 year time, we will have started giving the vaccine out first to the most vulnerable, then including doctors and healthcare workers, and then to the whole population. And we will be saying and looking back that probably the European Union has, with the contracts it has signed with the different pharmaceutical countries in the name of all member states, making accessible all this vaccine to everybody, has done hopefully a good job where we can continue. And we will hopefully also be debating that this should bring along competences for the European level in healthcare, something which it doesn't have today. And in the frame and in going with this whole debate, maybe around healthcare, which is the most pressing, we will hopefully also be discussing in 1 year time that the European Union should have much closer coordination roles on foreign direct investment, on energy and infrastructure, which are cross-border importance, on joint procurement in the defense area, and on also social measures, which are important to reach what Ulrike is mentioning, to increase that level of rights and to have a common minimum level of income or a common minimum wage. And also, why not something which we have proposed 20 years ago, which would be a common corporate tax base, so that no European company pays less than 12% of taxes wherever it is, and that it pays actually the taxes not where its fiscal seat is, but where its clients are and where it makes profits. So hopefully we will be discussing also this, which is a balance, if you like, also to go a bit in the turf of the frugals, Luxembourg and the Dutch and the Irish, you know. So this is my hope, that we will be discussing all of this and hopefully having the backing of citizens, which gives us the dynamic, and sorry to mention them again, but to force member states and politicians, because the parliament is with us. The European Parliament is with us, and the one house that we need, which is not with us, is the Council.
Yeah. I underscore, and Carmen, because you said it in your last sort of questioning round, that citizenship is not a homogeneous thing. I know. But still, in terms of legal equality, not social, but legal equality, citizens of a country are equal. And it's important that citizens do not compete. So if I have a wish for Europe in a year's time, to make it symbolism that citizens do not compete, whether you are from Polish or Slovak or Spanish or German background, I would like to see a European citizens card. A card like you have a Euro credit card, then you have a European citizenship card in your portemonnaie, each and everybody of us, as a getaway. And I think there's a learning process about symbolism. Even if we cannot go for the rights and basically harmonize them, and it will take 10 or 15 or whatsoever years, yeah, to get all these sort of harmonization in terms of unemployment and short work, sure programs, and so on and so forth. The symbolism, I think, would be very important to have a little European citizen card in your portemonnaie. To allow that, because that would have an impact on all our bureaucracies and administrations. If you move from Hamburg to Barcelona, if you want to vote like me, a German in Vienna for the local elections and so on and so forth, yeah, it would get us through a lot of administrative processes in times, and I look at Jochen, in times of digitalization, because now each and every country is thinking about digitalization of its bureaucracies, how to get your online portal as a German citizen in your whatever online administration. And I would love to see this process being Europeanized, so that a European citizenship creates an identity, that we get this European citizenship card, and through this you build a digitalized European citizenship sort of portal. Yeah, and this would be, I think, very interactive, and each and every citizen, from my mom to my kids, would sense it immediately that there's something going on. So that would be, I think, my most intense wish, how we could get started in very concrete terms this in a year's time.
Well, thank you very much to both of you, to Ulrike Guérot, political scientist and director of the European Democracy Lab, and to Jochen Müller, also deputy director of the representation of the European Commission in Madrid. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, for being here this afternoon. Thank you to all of you who stayed till the end, and I apologize again for the interruptions, the unwanted interruptions. But thank you very much indeed. And I'm sure that we'll have to debate a lot on where the EU is heading. But at the end, we are witnessing some changes, hopefully. And this is where we want to stick on. Thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon to everyone, and see you soon, I hope, personally. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Carmen, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Muchas gracias a ustedes para participar. Muchas gracias a nuestras tres personas que han hablado, tres especialistas que han hablado hoy con nosotros. Y en el nombre del Goethe-Institut, yo les felicito de participar en estos debates. Y gracias y buenas noches.